was 8 when our home caught fire. I remember standing on the other side of the street staring in awe as black smoke curled from the top of the windows. My mother was bawling her eyes out as a neighbour wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. My father just stood there, arms around my mother's waist with a blank look in his eyes. He had worked so hard to provide us a good home, and it was burning down in front of him. All of our earthly possessions, the family photos and the heirlooms, were feeding an unforgiving inferno. By the time the fire trucks arrived, the roof was starting to collapse. They worked to stop the fire from spreading to the trees and neighbouring homes as the dry August wind started to carry the embers. I was 15 when part of the school caught on fire. I watched from 3 blocks away. We had moved to a new town shortly after our last home burnt to the ground. From the front porch, I could see the school just down the road. The red hot glow illuminated the dark clouds and cast the trees in an orange light. Soon, the flashes of cold blue and white strobes joined warm colours radiating from the gymnasium. All of our neighbours were outside watching the same show. Their excited and worried chatter was almost as loud as the sirens. The school district brought in mobile classrooms for us to attend. It was well over a month before we were allowed back into the actual building. I was 18 when the convenience store on the other side of town caught fire. The black smoke rolled across the noon sky and filled the neighbourhoods with the stench of burning plastic and processed food. The firefighters battled the flame for hours and in the aftermath discovered the store owner blacked and curled in a fetal position where the office once stood. I was 22 when the woods caught on fire. I decided to go camping by myself in southern Oregon. I needed some alone time to clear my head from the pressures of college. I had just set up my tent and started a small campfire when I saw the red light glowing from the other side of a large hill. I stared in disbelief for longer than I should have. Birds and small woodland creatures started working their way through the trees and running past me. Soon I saw a deer, wolves, and a few bears also running away from the hill. I turned and started to run as I saw the first flames flicker above the crest. I left my camping supplies as I booked it towards the road. The raging fire illuminated my path as the sun dipped behind the distant mountains. After what seemed like an hour of panic and desperation, I could see the flashing lights through the forest. First responders grabbed me, took me to the hospital where I was treated for smoke inhalation and questioned by police. I later learned that while they couldn't discern the exact cause of the fire, they did discover 4 hikers who didn't make it out. I was 25 when the local Catholic church burst into flames. I watched from my office as fire poked through the steeple and licked the cross. The heat caused the surrounding trees to burn and fill the sky with rolling grey smoke. The fire department wasn't able to save the structure or the 3 people who had been unlucky enough to be trapped by the heat. I was 32 when the local hospital burned to the ground. It was a small and outdated hospital that was in the process of shutting down as a new and much larger one had been built on the edge of town. This hospital still treated minor conditions and housed several doctor offices. The fire was deemed as a wiring issue. 7 janitors, 1 radiologist, and a clerk died that night. I was 38 when the homeless shelter caught fire. The shelter had stood for a long time and had helped many people over the years. offering them a temporary home, resources, and food. The managers and volunteers had enough time to evacuate before the flames claimed the building. The authorities later declared it was an act of arson, and they suspected some of the homeless people. Not enough evidence could be collected to determine anyone's involvement though. I was 41 when the dealership went up in smoke. Stacks of tires burned hot and filled the sky with oily black smoke. Vehicles began to catch fire before the fire trucks could roll in. They fought the blaze for hours as I watched from my apartment. My fiancée complained about the smell and hoped out loud that no one was hurt. The sheriff made a statement about their suspicions of arson. I was 43 when I lost another home to a freak fire. I was out of town for a business meeting when it happened. The fire had started in the kitchen of our ranch-style house and spread at a horrific rate. The entire house was engulfed in less than 15 minutes. My wife and baby daughter were both asleep when it started. The neighbors could hear their screams as they burned. The investigators decided that this was caused by an arsonist. They put out an emergency warning to the township that someone in the community was a pyromaniac and a serial killer. I was 45 when the arsonist struck again. A low-income apartment building was set on fire. I saw the orange glow in the night sky as I was walking to the liquor store. I diverted and got close enough to watch the action. Firefighters attempted to rescue as many people as they could, but in the end, 87 inhabitants died. The fire had been started in both entrances to the building with an unknown accelerant. The sheriff called on the FBI to aid them in their investigation since they couldn't find a solid lead. Federal agents stayed in town for several weeks before giving up and moving on. I was 47 when my place of employment burned. Having lost my comfy office job thanks to my drinking, I ended up as a security guard at the local tire factory. It was 3 minutes past midnight when the alarm started. I quickly made all the necessary phone calls according to procedure. The fire had started in the warehouse and thankfully, the overnight workers managed to make it out unscathed. The fire raged white hot and took the fighters 2 days to put out the blaze. The fire was also accredited to the mystery arsonist. Unfortunately, I was brought in for intense questioning as a suspect. Eventually, I was cleared of all potential guilt. I was 52 when some of the homes in my trailer park raged with burning heat. These fires were automatically associated with the arsonist. One of the trailers held an unknown meth lab and it exploded. Shrapnel from the lab punched through nearby homes. By morning, 13 people had died from the fire and the explosion. I was 54 when the rate of man-made fires started to increase. At least once a month, some building was burning in town. People were moving out at an alarming rate, fearing for their safety and that of their families. The police chief was running ragged trying to get ahead of the situation. The FBI kept making regular appearances as they were trying to figure it out. I was 54 when the grain elevator exploded. The arsonist hit during harvest season when the silos were full of corn and dust. The police had marked the elevator as an obvious target and managed to catch a photo of the maniac. The man was covered from head to toe in black clothing, but it was the first lead they had. I was 55 when the cops knocked on my door with questions. Questions that, when answered, landed me as a suspect once again. I am now 59. I have been sitting in prison for 3 years now. One smart cookie of a federal agent had connected the right dots. He realized that I started all those glorious fires and gathered enough evidence to pin the crimes on me. Only after I was found guilty by a jury of my peers did I fully admit to my involvement. Ever since my first camping trip with my dad, I have been obsessed with flame. The fire calls to me and fills me with joy. Its mesmerizing flicker transports me to a place of mental clarity. The power of its purifying heat calms and soothes my soul. I obtain a feeling of power and control, and the blaze washes over the lives of others. If there is a God, he is fire and smoke. I am told I will die here in this prison, never to have freedom again. I am okay with never leaving this prison, but they are mistaken if they think they can keep me away from the fire.
Can you see me? Hello? Can you find me? Can you find me? I'm here. Behind you, look.